Do you remember? It is 2010, and Seiko is the brand for the wallet-conscious watch collector. SKX, Monster, Seiko 5. These are all model lineups from the brand that has etched itself into the memories of most collectors that were active during this time. Almost everyone watching this video has more than likely owned one of these, and I feel like it really speaks volumes on how awesome Seiko used to be. Now, I say used to be, well, because it isn't so much anymore, is it? I can't hide the fact that I have a big disdain for the new Presage models. I feel like pretty much any watch from the Presage line is a shadow of what Seiko used to be, and what they used to be able to provide. And I would avoid these altogether, and instead, save up or spend less for something just as good and or more interesting. Now I only say this because I know just how great Seiko was, and how much value they used to provide. All you have to do is look at this watch. Hello, my name is Martin, and I have a lust for watches. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to you about a watch from Seiko, the SARB 065, also known as Cocktail Time, or in Seiko's own words, just cool. As always, we need to discuss history. The Cocktail Time, aka SARB 065, was a collaboration between Seiko and famed Japanese bartender Ishigaki Shinobu of the Ishinohana bar in Tokyo. The Cocktail Time lineup at release of 2010 originally released with 3 watches: Cool SARB 065, Dry SARB 066, and Sweet SARB 068. The only watch worth talking about amongst collectors was and still is Cool, which we are looking at today. The SARB 065 has an outstanding reputation, and even at a glance it's clear as a dry martini on how beautiful the watch is. As with all good things, it had to come to an end. Seiko around this time had a fundamental shift in their business model. Up until this time, Seiko was known to provide a whole lot of watch for not so much money, hence their popularity. Well, I guess Seiko got tired of being known as an affordable watch brand and decided they would give themselves a makeover and try to bump up their game a bit. Well, that resulted in prices going up across the board, and also Seiko introducing the Presage model of watches. Say what you will, but the Presage lineup from Seiko was a shot in the gut for me. It signaled the end of an era and heralded a new generation of watches that were overpriced and under spec'd. The specs. The watch has a wingspan of 47.5 millimeters, width of 40 millimeters, glass width of 35 millimeters, and lug width of 20 millimeters. It's 13 millimeters thick, weighs 85 grams, and has a water resistance rating of 5 ATM. The watch is made of stainless steel and comes with a domed Hardlex crystal made by Seiko. The movement inside is a 6R15, which comes with a negative 15 seconds to plus 25 seconds a day, and a power reserve of 50 hours, and comes equipped with 23 joules and a day complication. There is an exhibition case back, and the watch comes on a black leather strap with blue stitching, which comes equipped with a butterfly clasp. This watch is no longer made by Seiko and has been replaced by the new cocktail time models in Seiko's Presage lineup. The direct descendant of the watch is SRPB43. If you want to know the differences between the two, check out the Seiko Guys page, which I've linked in the description. The specific watch was purchased by myself via JDM reseller shopping in Japan in the year of 2014 for the handsome price of 435 USD. First things first, the glass is Hardlex and not sapphire as most would like. I own several Hardlex crystal watches from Seiko, and yes, they do scratch, and yes, they are warmer and inherently softer than sapphire, but it really doesn't take anything away from the watch. For a watch nicknamed Cool by Seiko themselves, I would say the watch would have benefited the most from all the cocktail time watches at release to have been outfitted with sapphire. However, for the price, it probably just couldn't be justified. The dial has a burst pattern and is monochromatic. Some call it silver, some call it blue, but Seiko got it close by calling it cool. There are very hair-thin striations that get denser at each minute interval, which is responsible for creating the burst effect. This same design feature is what also makes the dial shimmer with a turn of the face. To get a better understanding of the dial, imagine yourself in a bar late at night with the heavy stench of cigarette smoke lingering in the air, and seeing that smoke waft by, and think you can just picture that color that the dial conjures. It's not so much a single color, I realize, but rather like a film of coolness that's been laid over a silver plate. The date window found at 3 o'clock has a polished border and a white background. Also, the date window has rounded corners, which I always look for. It just tells me that the details weren't glossed over and shows how much it matters to get it right. No shortcuts were taken here. At the top of the dial is the name of the brand, Seiko, applied, and at the bottom is printed automatic and 23 joules. At the very bottom of the dial, of course, Japan, and the movement name is printed. The indices are well executed. At each cardinal position, there are one-piece applied markers that have a center plateau surrounded by sides that fall straight down. At the non-cardinal positions are two-piece applied markers that come to an apex in the middle, giving them highly legibility, even at very low light conditions. Dauphine handset here. Both the hour and minute hands are identical in design and only differ in sizing, with the minute hand being obviously longer. The seconds hand is dark blue and provides the cool factor. Edges on the hands are acceptable at the price the watch is sold at, but they do appear a bit scratchy under macro and would not compare even remotely to the finishing found on watches at much higher price points. For the price though, you probably would have a hard time finding anything better out there in the market anymore. The case is rugged to say the least, especially for a dress watch. The sides are mostly flat and only has curves where the roundedness of a typical watch would dictate. There is a step from the side profile to the bezel, and the bezel blends into the domed Hardlex with a bit of a stutter, but it isn't offensive in any way and feels quite smooth in hand. The case back is pillowed, allowing for the watch to wear comfortably on wrist even during extreme movements. The crown is signed and sports the letter S for sexy. Lugs are strong and, to be quite frank, sharp. Whether it is good or bad is entirely up to you. The crown is big enough not to be an issue to wind, and with the pillowing of the case back, it's a non-factor in wrist digging and allows the watch to wear quite comfortably, and at times you could be forgiven into believing you aren't wearing a watch at all. Inside the watch is Seiko's 6R15, which is now usually found only in watches above $1,000 USD from Seiko. The movement comes with 50 hours of power reserve and has a daily deviation of +25 to -15 seconds. It is hackable and can be manually wound. There is a date complication which can be adjusted via the first position, and the time, as is typical, can be adjusted in the farthest position or second position in this case. Over my years with the movement, I haven't found it to be lacking in any shape or form. I've never had an issue with the watch, and as you can see, it still runs beautifully. Alright, the pros. I have to admit, I love the watch, but I don't wear it very much anymore. It was, I believe, my 5th watch at the time. I'd already collected a couple monsters, a couple of Orients, and it was time for the SARB 065 to grace itself into my life. I had fallen in love with the dial as many others did at first sight, and upon wearing and using the watch for the first while, I couldn't take it off. As I had mentioned, the watch wears beautifully. It just melts onto your wrist, just like cold butter on a warm brioche bun. It is a classic watch that can never be replaced no matter what anyone tries. You can try retrofitting the watch under a new name and to try to make any identical copy, but nothing will ever compare to this OG. This is the Big Daddy, and to me really signifies a huge turning point in Seiko's history, and thus it will always remain a darling in the eyes of collectors old and new alike. No other watch I have owned or seen really encapsulates its namesake so well. It wouldn't be so far off to say that by simply wearing the watch, your body temperature may drop by a few centigrades. Surprisingly, the one thing that really caught my eye initially and still keeps me entertained to this day is the simple text found on the bottom half of the dial. Nothing more than these 2 lines, automatic in script, and 23 jewels, encapsulates Seiko's identity better. Something about the cursive font found in automatic really symbolizes Seiko here for me. Call it nostalgia, or just a longing for something that harkens to the beauty of simplicity. But just the aesthetic of these 2 lines are what make Seiko, well, Seiko. It's stupid, but simple things like this are what watch collectors get fixated on. And these dumb fixations are what makes a watch worth adding to a collection over time. Charlie, shh. For the cons, just one word. As with most other watches and their cons in my reviews, the SARB 065 also suffers the same fate. It's thick. 13 millimeters is unacceptable as a dress watch. If it isn't 10 millimeters or less, it's not really a dress watch now, is it? Why the case back to reveal a non-decorated rotor? Sure, it's got Geneva striping, but it's not very deep, and the wheels and the cogs don't look very well finished. Save a millimeter or two, please, and just ditch the exhibition case back. It was cool when you were in high school, but after your 10th watch with the same exhibition case back, showing nothing of value, it just becomes trite. The case being so rugged is a bit of an oxymoron here. Being a dress watch, in my opinion, it could have used a bit more curvature or softening of the edges, especially the lugs. It's not to say that it's too sharp, as I've already mentioned the watch wears so well you hardly notice it, but sometimes when handling the watch I do notice the edges digging into my fingertips. The S on the crown always had a Comic Sans font look, which I never personally enjoyed. I'd rather they just didn't sign the crown like they usually do, or in a better font like the script they used in the printing found on the dial. It just never looked right. Would I ever repeat this purchase should I lose or break the watch beyond repair? Now, as the watch is no longer being produced by Seiko, I would cry a bit if the watch should ever be lost or break. And if it did, I would not bother replacing it with a duplicate, nor would I ever go into Presage land to get a fake copycat. I would simply say it was fate and move on. As much as it pains me to say this, I rarely ever wear the watch anymore, and I probably could get a bit of funds for selling it, but the condition it is in is quite poor at best, and I don't think I could ever sell the watch. Would be like asking me to sell one of my children. No, don't even ask. Sometimes I put the watch on for 5 minutes before I go back and grab the watch I'm actually going to wear for the day or period. And I just sit and sip of my coffee and just marvel at the beauty that the watch is. But like a long-lost flame, it's only so good until the truth rears its ugly, distorted face and you realize there's a reason why you broke up in the first place. Well, I am at a bit of a loss for words at this point. I don't really like reviewing watches that can no longer be purchased, because most likely there's a bunch of reviews already, but being one of my old flames, I felt it needed to be showcased here, at least on my channel. I feel that the watch really does deliver so much for the price paid that it will forever go down into the history books as one of the best value watches ever sold on the market. If you really like the watch and you are contemplating between the old and new, don't even bother thinking, just get the old. As with anything, the first is always the best, is it not? The SARB 065 sums up Seiko's golden age and really highlights a shift in Seiko's business model and its attempts to move into a higher price bracket without pissing off an army of watch collectors. Well, they failed miserably, and to this day they are still trying to maneuver themselves into that upper echelon of watch companies, all the while trying to leave behind them a rich history that none of us could ever forget. It just leaves me feeling a little cool, knowing that we as collectors will never see anything close to the SARB 065 from not only Seiko but most other watch manufacturers, regardless of their size and history. Do you own a SARB 065 yourself? How has your experience been with it? Do you own the new SRPB 43? If so, do you like the watch? Let us know in the comments your experiences with either of these, and perhaps any Presage watches that you were impressed by. Well, if you like this video and would like to see more, you know what to do. And until next time, keep it real. Bye bye.